Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Kira and today's video is a color along chosen by you. I love posting polls on my community tab here on YouTube as well as my Instagram stories to see what pages you guys want me to color, what books I should color in, and also just what videos you want to see. So always keep an eye on my socials if you want to participate in future polls. And for this month's color along, you guys chose this page here from Trolle's Shooting Star. I secretly hoped that this page would win because I really wanted to color it, so I'm so thrilled that you guys felt the same way. If you're new to my monthly color alongs, I always like to have a primary focus or lesson that I like to explore more in depth in each video. This way, you're just not watching me color a page, but you're also learning something too. So as you can see from the title, today I'm going to be showing you my step-by-step guide to coloring a page with a limited color palette. I find that it's always recommended to beginners to use pre-made color palettes at the start of their coloring journey, but then there's always the question of how to actually apply that palette to a coloring page. So that's what I want to dive into today. Let's just get started. If you saw my last video, you'll know that this month I'm trying to focus on Halloween themed coloring. That's really hard to say. Halloween themed coloring, Halloween themed coloring. And while this page isn't inherently Halloween themed, it will be by the time we finish this video. Now, when I apply a limited color palette to my pages, I've created a 7-step process. And the first step is finding 2 to 3 pre-made color palettes for inspiration on Pinterest. In this case, I'm specifically searching for Halloween color palettes, but of course you can adapt your search depending on the page that you're coloring. You might search for a spring palette, a pastel palette, or an underwater palette. Just whatever the vibe is that you're going for, search for that. And if you're completely unsure of what palette that you're going for, just type color palettes into Pinterest and draw some inspiration from there. After selecting 2 to 3 color palettes that you like, step 2 is to create your own color palette made out of 5 to 6 colors. This step is optional if you already find a color palette that's perfect for your needs. However, I usually find that I like to pick 1 or 2 colors from each palette to craft the ideal palette for my page. I do this in my Procreate app on my iPad, but if you don't have that, you could easily do it on Canva or even just a Word document. Step 3 is always one that I really enjoy, which is creating a multitude of 3 color combinations from my curated palette. You can see all the color combinations that I've put together here, and these are all combinations that I believe won't result in too muddy of a blend. I really take into consideration the color wheel, color theory, and just how colors mix together at this step. Once you've put together all the combinations that you can think of, it is then time to pick your top 5 to 6. This number depends on how many elements are on the page that you're coloring. Since the page I'm coloring today from Shooting Star is relatively simple, I've just gone with these top 5 combinations here. This next step isn't always necessary in my limited color palette process, and this step involves planning out my light sources and adding additional elements. Clearly, I wouldn't do this if there were no light sources or additional elements that I wanted to add to my coloring page, but I really wanted to up the Halloween vibes as much as possible, so I definitely had to do it for this page. And to plan this all out, what I do is I take a picture of the page and then upload it to my Procreate app. And then with my Apple Pencil, I just go in and plan out the light sources and add what additional elements I think the page needs. If this step is too technologically heavy for you or you don't know how to use Procreate, you can always photocopy the page and then just use a pencil to plan out everything on the copy. Step 6 is when you determine where each of your color combinations are going to go on the page. If you wanted to go the extra mile, you could plan out the color placement on the digital image or your photocopy. I personally didn't really feel the need to do it on this page, and as you can see, I've allocated the color combos for the leaves, stems, clouds, house, and mushroom tops, and I used just a 2 color combination for the little girl's outfit since it's a relatively small space to color. You could also decide the colors of your background at this stage as well, but I had no idea what I wanted my background colors to be yet, so I left it in this case. If I don't know what to color a background, I always have a better idea of what it should be after I've colored like all of the foreground. So that's what I decided to do here. And then the 7th and final step of my limited color palette process is choosing the corresponding pencil colors. For most colors in my palette, I will choose a shadow, midtone, and highlight for each color. And the midtone will be the color closest to what's already represented in my palette. I don't necessarily use every pencil that I pick out at this stage. I just find that it's good to have them on hand just in case if I do decide to use the highlight shade of a color or the shadow shade. For this color along, we'll be using prismacolors, and these are all the colors that I pulled. These are the 3 colors I chose for teal, the 3 colors for purple, the 3 colors for orange, the 3 colors for green, the 3 colors for pink, and then just the plain black Prismacolor and 2 different shades of yellow for my light sources. I will choose different colors for the little girl's skin and hair, but I'm gonna do that when I actually get to the process of coloring her. So yeah, that is my 7-step process for working with a limited color palette. I know it's quite different to a standard approach, but I just love having lots of different colors within my color combos, and I find that this process is the best way to achieve that. Okay, now that we covered all 7 steps, let's get into the actual color along. Okay, I'm going to address it straight away. Yes, those are scratches all over my hands, and they're not from me, they're from my cat. Our fluffiest cat Archie keeps getting some unpleasant substances stuck in his bum fur, and yeah, he just doesn't enjoy me removing them. So expect to frequently see scratches all over my hands because this seems to be becoming a more regular occurrence than both of us would like. But anyway, back to the actual topic that we're here to chat about. The first thing I'm doing is sketching in my additional elements with the soft lead pencil. The softer the pencil, the easier it is to erase later. You'll see my Derwent electric eraser pop up a lot in this color along. This thing has become my best friend recently. Not only does it easily erase pencil, but you can also use it to create some really cool effects on your coloring pages, like clouds, sun rays, bubbles. I think I might have to do a dedicated video on that topic someday. So to outline my sketches, I'm using some other new favorite products of mine, the Ohuhu Fine Liner drawing pens. I raved about these pens in my recent alcohol marker video, so I won't do it again. But what I love about these fine liners is that they are smear proof, which means when I color over them or use my electric eraser on top of them to, erase my lead pencil sketches, the ink does not smudge. We love to see it. I did mess up a little bit by using the 1mm fine liner to color in the bats, as there did end up being some ghosting on the back of my page. So maybe don't do what I did here. Instead, I'd recommend using an acrylic marker, which is what I ended up doing at the end anyway, to increase the opacity of the black. At the moment, I'm really trying to focus on improving my portrayal of light sources in my pages. And I've found that plotting them out from the start is the most effective method to do this. So if you guys have any other tips and tricks for light sources, please share them in the comments below. I always love learning from you. And what I'm doing here is using my darker yellow shade where the light source is strongest, then transitioning to the lighter shade as the lighting fades out. I formatted this color along similar to my last one, where I'll demonstrate coloring a couple of the same elements on camera, then color repetitive elements off camera to keep this tutorial nice and concise for you. And of course, I'll just be using the same color combinations for each repetitive element on the page. As you saw in step 6 of my limited color palette process, I chose a black, green, and teal combo for the leaves. I discussed this in a recent tutorial where I showed how to create color combos like Rita Berman, so check out that video for a more in-depth explanation if you haven't already. But generally what I do is look at the 3 color combination that I've chosen and assign roles based on the tone. So the darkest becomes my shadow color, the lightest my highlight color, and the remaining one is my mid-tone. I sometimes adjust this process depending on how the page is coming together and the pencils that I initially selected, but this is my typical approach. In this case, black is my shadow, green is my midtone, and teal is my highlight. Within each color combo today, you'll see me enhancing light sources with the lightest yellow where needed, and occasionally adding touches of yellow for visual interest. I'm also determining shadow placement for the leaves by considering overlapping objects and my predetermined light sources. So I chose a purple, pink, and orange combo for the mushroom tops, using my light sources to determine where the shadow placement would be. Whilst colouring these mushrooms, you'll occasionally see me use a white prismacolor pencil for blending the colours together. I used to solely rely on the prismacolor colourless blender pencil for smoothing out difficult blends, but recently I found that the white prismacolor is far more effective. It just blends the pigments so well together on the page. The only drawback of using white instead of the colourless blender is that it slightly mutes the pigment that's already on the page. This doesn't really bother me since I always use bright colours, so even when the white dilutes the colour, the difference isn't too dramatic. However, this might be something to consider if you don't typically use such vibrant colours in your work. Okay, for the mushroom stems and these swirly vine-like things on the sides, I'm using a black, purple, and teal combo with some tinges of yellow yet again. This also adds a bit of green to the blend when the teal and yellow mix together. I absolutely love it when this happens because it's like adding another color to the blend without actually using that color pencil, if that makes sense. I really want to start experimenting with this more in the future and just expand my knowledge of how colors mix together. I mean, I know the basics from primary school, but I really want to extend my knowledge about it further. It'll obviously make me a better colorist and allow me to teach you guys better as well. I've been lucky enough to always have a natural eye for color and what colors look good together, but I'm getting to the point now where I'd like to understand the actual science behind it. I don't know if science is the correct terminology in this circumstance, but I'm going with it. So yeah, I'm gonna have to do some more research and find some good sources that aren't too educational, because as soon as a resource gets too technical and wordy, I lose interest immediately. Now you can interpret these fluffy objects at the bottom as either bushes or clouds, but I went with the clouds because I absolutely love coloring clouds. I just find that they offer so much potential for fun color blends, techniques, and using different mediums as well. In fact, I'm actually working on the Rita Berman cloud tutorial for my channel, which I promise will be out by the end of the month. It is coming, so keep your eyes peeled for that. Originally, the plan was to use a black, pink, and orange combo here. However, I decided to omit the black because I was really enjoying how these lighter colors contrasted with the darker blends above. So instead of a black, I used dark purple to add shadows and dimension. This was actually a tip that I picked up from one of my subscribers' comments, so if you're watching this, thank you so much again. Using a dark purple pencil instead of black for your shadows really helps create a softer, more natural effect while still adding richness and depth to your pages. I've also found that purple blends more easily with colors on the lighter end of the spectrum as well. Now, as often happens to me in these color alongs, I encountered some camera focusing issues while coloring the little girl at the top, so I've compiled the usable footage together without speeding it up, so you should still be able to follow along fairly easily. I promise I'm investigating my camera's focusing settings, so hopefully I will be able to prevent this from happening in the future. Keep your fingers and toes crossed for me. Okay, I'm gonna go on a little bit of a tangent here. I'm starting to feel increasingly inspired to color more people in my coloring pages. I've been, and to some extent still am, very intimidated by coloring people, particularly their skin and hair. In my opinion, it's so easy to mess up shading on skin and hair compared to, say, like a box or a flower. However, since coloring that page in Year of Witches from my alcohol marker video, I'm starting to think maybe I don't need to be so afraid. I really enjoyed coloring that page, as well as this little girl on this page here. And even though I barely did any shading here, I'm slowly starting to build up my confidence and my shading ability. So I definitely want to start coloring more people soon. And I really think Maria Troll's books will be an excellent way to break the ice for me with this skill. Her illustrations strike a great balance between realistic and cartoony people. So yes, this will be my gateway to building my confidence and choosing more pages with people in them. Please hold me to it. Okay, I'm gonna let you watch me color in peace for a little bit, and then I'll be back to walk you through my background and acrylic marker process. Given the warm colors at the bottom of the page and the darker color combinations in the foreground, I decided to create a bit more contrast with a light, cool toned combo for the sky. You might have seen me use this technique in my recent background ideas video. It involves applying several light layers with my colored pencils until I'm satisfied with the saturation. Then I use a white Prismacolor pencil to blend everything together for a super smooth finish. I didn't film the entire blending process with the white pencil because it's quite repetitive and very time consuming, so just know that that's what I did here to achieve the final result. When adding the finishing touches with my Posca and arrtx acrylic markers, I definitely went through a bit of trial and error. First, I applied a base layer of white Posca on all the line work that I didn't want visible in the final result, like the circles and little dots around my added in bats. This ensures that when I go over it with less opaque colored acrylic markers later, the line work is completely invisible. To create a translucent effect for the chimney smoke, I used a slightly damp water brush to dilute some paint from my acrylic marker and then applied it to the page with the water brush. This creates a less opaque effect, which is perfect for smoky elements, and then I outlined my line work with the white Posca. Initially, I used a pale yellow marker to color the white circles I had created. However, finding the color wasn't the best match, I switched to a more saturated yellow, which worked much better. And as discussed at the beginning of this color along, I used my black acrylic marker to emphasize the bats and make the black more opaque. One of my favorite techniques for enhancing light sources is going over any line work that the light initially hits with a pale yellow acrylic marker. It is super effective and an easy way to accentuate the lighting you're trying to achieve on the page. I was a bit stumped on what to do with the little dots surrounding the bats. Ultimately, I decided to add my own dots in similar shades of blue to the background, making it seem more intentional and preventing the bats from looking like they just had little white halos over their heads. Afterwards, I ended up adding some more white dots and just more blue dots at other points in the background, just so it didn't feel like the dots were connected to the bats, but were rather a textural, really struggling to say that, textural background effect. I'm not sure if I executed this very effectively, but that was my intention. On the roof, I added a little more dimension with white highlights at the bottom of the little rounded slates, or slats. I think slats is the more correct term. I didn't feel the need to add any other acrylic details to the house besides, the door handle, and yet again accentuating lighting here with a pale yellow acrylic marker. And then the final place I went in with my acrylic marker touch was the line work of the clouds. I almost always go over the line work when there are clouds on any page I'm coloring, as it just helps soften their appearance and make them feel a little bit more naturalistic. I used pale yellow over the lines affected by the lighting from the house windows, and then pink and orange to cover the rest of the line work. Similar to the situation with the light sources in the background, I initially chose a pink color that wasn't a good match for the page, so I went over it with a slightly more saturated pink acrylic marker, which worked much better. And this is just one of the reasons why I love acrylic markers, because if you make a mistake, you can either cover it with another acrylic marker color or gently scratch it off with your fingernail. Something to note that I didn't show on camera, I actually did 2 to 3 layers of each acrylic marker color, because whilst I love the color selection of my arrtx brush acrylic markers, they aren't always the most opaque, so they need a couple of layers to achieve the opacity that I prefer. And here is the final result. And I'd say I'm fairly happy with how it all turned out. I'm still not totally convinced on the acrylic marker dots I added to the background, but I couldn't really think of another effective way to hide the line work that was already on the page. I also feel like I could have maybe done a better job at fading the blue background out at the top of the image image, but otherwise I'm pretty pleased. I really do love how the color palette came together, and I'm also really happy with the textural effects I was able to create on the house. And there you have it, team, my color along for this normal turned Halloween coloring page in Maria Troll's Shooting Star. As I mentioned at the beginning of this video, if you'd like to help choose the book and page that I color in for next month's color along, make sure you're checking out my community tab here on YouTube, as well as my Instagram stories, as that's where I'll be posting all the polls. In the meantime, happy coloring, friends. Have a good day, have a good life, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!